unions are fighting it tooth and nail.
Now, why
of
would
course.
the unions, you say of course, but why would they do that? Why
Oh,
would they
because
fight it?
for one thing, some unions make a lot of money off of pension systems, and it's a negotiation.
It's a benefit.
Cachet, right? So when they're negotiating the package for their members, benefits is one of the things they've managed to secure. And they like the current system because it allows them to get good, really out of extraordinary benefits, I guess is the word. And if they give that up, then that's one whole area they will no longer be able to negotiate and no longer be able to control.
Okay, so they're fighting this.
And the employees are a little more split. A lot of employees, everybody would rather have just a free pension coming to them than have to actually save part of their salary. But some recognize that it's kind of like Social Security. Are you really going to get it at the end of the day? Do you feel the guarantee is real, or would you rather have your own responsibility, save for yourself? So some government workers, I think, don't completely oppose the change, but it's going to be politically hard for politicians to do it. And one of the things we're advocating is, okay, fine, just start doing it for all new employees. We'll figure out what to do about the existing employees over time. We'll have to. We have no choice. But from now on, don't hire anybody else under that old archaic pension system. Hire everyone under a defined contribution plan, a 401k style, and that way we're not digging ourselves in any deeper trouble.
Okay, so the unions are fighting this.
Yes.
You're kind of split with the government workers.
Yeah.
Where are we right now with that?
It's an emerging issue. Only the governments who are in crisis are really focused on it right now, and all the rest are starting to say, "Wow, that's a problem.
Let's
Gosh, could
see
it
what
happen
somebody
to me?"
else is doing about it, and we'll just follow their
exactly.
lead, right?
And some governments that are not in any trouble now, they've got other chickens to cook or whatever,
Yeah.
and so a lot of them are ignoring it. Some are paying attention. I've spoken to several organizations of state legislators and so forth who are interested in hearing about it, but the change is so difficult that it's going to be hard for anybody to be proactive on it. Most of them are going to have to wait till there's a crisis.
I see.
And then when there's a crisis, well, that means you've really only got two choices ultimately.
Right.
You've got to quit spending somewhere else because now you've got to make up this pension obligation.
Right.
Or you've got to raise taxes. Well, we all know there's way too many governments around this country who are willing to raise taxes to get themselves out of a pickle. And so I fear we're going to see a lot of that. And so part of what we're trying to do is, make sure that they're aware that there are alternatives to that, but also really educate the public so they don't stand for these tax increases, so they recognize that this is not, a market downturn. That's what they usually blame. They blame the stock market for it. And many, many studies have shown that no, the stock market had 5% of the cause. Most of the cause was they didn't put enough money in.
Poor management.
Poor management. Yeah. Well, boy, you never see that in government, do you?
No, never. Now you're going around and educating folks, and I know that on Reason.org, there's several essays and schedules on when Mr. Poole is actually going to be speaking about this. Do you speak about this as well?
Yes.
And so if anybody is interested in knowing a little bit more about this pension crisis and the Reason Foundation and the Libertarian Party position on this, then you can go to Reason.org and look that up. Where are we? We're going. How? I don't even know how to ask the question. How are we with that? I mean, you've talked to how many government entities?
It's the start. I spoke to a fairly conservative group of legislators, and it was very well received. They recognize that this is a problem, and they're generally more fiscally conservative anyway. So they already recognized there was a problem. And I spoke to a fairly liberal group of state legislators, and there was a lot of union members there, and I got booed and heckled.
Really?
That was pretty bad. But there was just a lot of resistance there. It's appalling how many public officials really truly think that their first responsibility is to take care of the government and not, they'll say to the voters, but when you start talking about particulars like this, it's like, no, we have to take care of our workers first. I say, no, you have to take care of the taxpayers first. The workers, they got to suck it up.
That's right, and they made that choice to go work for the government.
Exactly. They get a lot of job security, and they have really high benefits and pretty commensurate pay in most cases. So it's not like they're hurting.
And it is interesting that my experience with the government has been that because it's no competition, right. It's kind of a monopoly, there isn't a whole lot of and don't take this personally, but there's not a whole lot of urgency on the government's part to make any kind of changes for the taxpayer at all.
Right.
So
until it really becomes a crisis, and that's what you see going. I mean, the most famous one is San Diego, where they're facing potentially bankruptcy. The mayor resigned. A couple of city council members went to jail, and the process of exposing how incredibly corrupt and venal the system was is just amazing. I mean, they've uncovered emails where you had top-level people in the government coaching each other on how to basically steal the biggest pension possible, and to use every loophole in the system to get these ridiculous situations. There's actually a lot of people, especially in California. For some reason, California is the worst. I can't imagine why.
Maybe it's because we have the most.
But there's an astonishing number of people who are retiring at a higher level of pay than they were paid when they were working.
It's like collusion. It's like there's this club that says, okay, well, you're coming up to your retirement in about 3 years. Let's bump you up to the next 3 or 4 higher paying salaries. And who's going to know? Who's going to watch us?
Right.
Who's going to object to that?
Oh yeah, it's called pension spiking. And there's a million ways it can be done, and in fact, our report documents a lot of these practices. A great one, especially in public safety related fields, is to go on disability right before you retire, because your disability pay is tax free. So that increases your actual pay, and your pension is based on that. So your pension is higher. You can cash in. You can not take a lot of vacation or sick time and accumulate that and cash that in to raise your pay. There's all kinds of tricks that they play.
Wow.
And
so how do we as taxpayers monitor what's going on in our own city with that pension? Is there someplace we can go? Is there something we can look up? Is it a public? is it for public consumption?
Yes, it is. Well, in fact, I've had some debates over that, because technically it's all public, but for a person who isn't really an expert on government budgeting to find it is almost a fool's errand. It's very, very hard to figure out what's going on. It's generally pretty buried in what the government is doing. The reporters sometimes uncover it, but even they get confused a lot. I've reading through a lot of news reports, doing our research on this, I saw quite a few times when the reporters who covered this stuff all the time couldn't figure out what was going on.
I see.
And so a typical citizen's really going to struggle. But generally, it's going to be your city or your county or your state budget where you're going to see that. In my county, they just had to increase substantially the amount that we pay into the pension system, make up for what we didn't do in previous years. And because we did that, we didn't have that money for other things. So there actually had to be a public meeting where we figured out, well, what are we going to not do so that we can pay for this obligation? And that raised it to the public's awareness, the ones who were there.
Well, and that brings up another issue. Isn't this something that has to be a referendum that raises taxes or makes any kinds of changes to that? Isn't that something that has to be open to the public and known to the public? Oh, you're giving me that eye,
not
Adrian.
Necessarily. I mean, California has some fairly tight rules. It's hard for local governments to raise taxes without a public vote. There are some circumstances under which they can, like there are various, back doors and so forth. Outside of California, very few states have, and local governments have, those kind of restrictions. So in most of the country where these problems are occurring, tax increases are part of the option that they're looking at.
So tell us, as a taxpayer watching this program on their public access station, what do we do now?
Well, the big thing is to watch out. What you'll hear is, we have to raise taxes, or else we're going to have to lay off some policemen or some firemen. That's all. I always say it's police and fire. They're going to have to cut. No, we're not going to cut the dog catchers and the billboard inspectors and all that. No, we're going to cut police and fire. Never fall for that. That's always a lie.
Okay.
Even if 2/3 of the budget goes to police and fire, you still have 1/3 that you can cut instead. So don't fall for that. Instead, ask, why is the deficit there? What were the